Hey guys, Dr. Bobby here. Listen, I just came out of the gym, and as I was walking to the car, I was thinking to myself, listen, this will be an awesome opportunity for your viewing audience and the people who follow you to see you in a little bit more of a relaxed situation. So I'm in my hometown in Louisiana, and I figured I'd do this video a little bit differently. I'll take you along the day with me as I spend time with my family and friends, and we'll also take an opportunity to put some tidbits of information in between. So today we'll talk a little bit about exactly why I'm in Louisiana, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about physician burnout and exactly why I quit my last job. So stay tuned. This will be a great video. Hey guys, so I'm just getting back from the gym. I had to check the mail. I haven't been here in a few months. This is a property that I picked up a long time ago. I'll get into that on a video, but this is my place that I keep in Louisiana in order to have, so that when I come to visit my family, I have somewhere to stay. Otherwise, I am going to go in here and get showered, but there's two things about Louisiana that you need to understand. At this time of the year, in August, is the worst heat that you've ever imagined. Super hot, super oppressive, and super humid. And number two, you need to know that after I work out, I have to go to the Waffle House. So I went to the Waffle House. I got some food to go, and I'm going to go in. I'm going to eat that really quickly, and then I'm going to get showered, and I'll come back and talk to you guys. All right, guys, I'm back. I'm fully showered, and I'm pretty refreshed at this point. So I wanted to take a quick moment to explain to you exactly why I'm in Louisiana. Obviously, with the COVID pandemic, I haven't been able to visit my family, and I also haven't been able to come to my house in a number of months. So I've been away from here probably for about 6 months. But unfortunately, within the span of time, one of my uncles unfortunately passed away. And it was a very big shock because he was the baby brother of my mom. And it really was a shock to everybody involved in our family. So it was a pretty sudden death, and like all deaths, unfortunately, they bring up a lot of emotions as it relates to family and just loss. So we had to come home because he died during the COVID pandemic and had been cremated, and we all came together as a family, socially distanced, of course, to remember him. We came together to remember him and to celebrate his life, and we interned him in our family plot. And so I came home, obviously, to do that, but also to see my family. So later on today, we'll go to my sister's house, and she's gonna throw some stuff onto the grill, and you'll get to see some of my family. I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about physician burnout. Physician burnout is an extremely important topic, and this goes for not just physicians, but burnout in careers in general. But obviously, with me being a doc, I'm going to talk about it from the standpoint of a physician. So this video will be of extreme importance to anybody who's in medical school, anybody in residency, anybody who finds themselves in a career that they are questioning, or in a space where they are feeling as though they're overwhelmed, or that they ultimately may not want to do it anymore because of certain circumstances. So for physicians, physician burnout is essentially when you get to a point in your career where the satisfaction that you had from the career is no longer providing you enough satisfaction to remain sustainable. And unfortunately, you find yourself in a situation where you don't want to do it anymore. And typically, all physicians get into this rut at some point in their careers with the advent of paperwork in medicine, with the advent of corporatization in medicine, which is essentially when large venture capitalist groups buy your groups, and then you become a commodity for extremely wealthy people to diversify their portfolios. You can definitely feel like you're just a cog in the wheel for the man. And unfortunately, that can leave you in a situation where your job satisfaction goes down, and you ultimately wonder if it's even worth actually doing what it is that you spent all this time doing. So for me, my experience with physician burnout actually happened in my last job. And fortunately enough for me, I actually quit my last job. And, for those of you who know me, many of you who watch these videos actually know me, I actually started out my career in academic medicine. And I really enjoyed being in academics for a variety of reasons, primarily because there's a youthful exuberance that happens when you work in academic medicine. You tend to be surrounded by very young and energetic physicians and people in various stages of their training. And while you're teaching them, you're also remaining sharp. And there's also just this energy of discovery. And I found that to be very gratifying. You know, I really felt like I was doing God's work. I was able to teach people who knew less than me. I was able to learn from people who were more experienced than me. And I was able to do and be around some of the smartest people I've ever been able to be around. But at a certain juncture in my career, I wanted to make sure that I experienced the fullness of anesthesiology. So for me, I decided that I wanted to go into private practice. Yes, in private practice, there are many differences than academic medicine, and I'll do a video on that at some point. But for the sake of this video, you know, I was interested in making more money. Obviously, that was very important to me. And just a side note, I want to make it very clear for medical students and for residents, please understand that I know that your programs may shun away from explaining to you the importance of ensuring that you are being paid exactly what you are deserving of being paid based on your experience and the things that you've had to go to become a physician. But please understand, there is nothing wrong with you taking the opportunity to ensure that you are getting everything that you deserve. You've gone through a lot to be in this position that you're in. You've gone through college, you've gone through medical school, you've gone through exponential amounts of training in order to ensure, and debt, let's not forget debt. You've gone through a lot in order to get here. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to be paid the exact amount that you are owed. So I wanted to throw that in there because there are a lot of situations in medicine where talking about finance and talking about being compensated for your time and being compensated for what it is that you do is pretty frowned upon by attending physicians and not openly discussed. So I make a vow to you guys on this channel that I am definitely going to do a video on negotiating and on understanding exactly how to ensure that you're not being taken advantage of by jobs, because that was also part of one of the reasons why I felt like I needed to quit my job. But essentially, I joined a private practice because I wanted to have a different view of being an anesthesiologist. In private practice, you can typically go into a situation where you're in a very highly productive space where you're able to make more money, you're able to potentially become business partners in a group practice and ultimately own part of a business. And when I started out wanting to go into private practice, that was really what I wanted. So I joined a very well-respected private practice in my area, and I absolutely enjoyed it. With that being said, all the people who became my partners later in the practice were phenomenal physicians and people that I highly respect to this day. But there were a lot of differences within private practice that was very different than in academics. And those differences sort of stem around culture. In the culture of how things are done. In private practice, there is a premium placed on ensuring that you are efficient with your time and that you are absolutely efficient in ensuring that you're doing what you need to do when you need to do it and in the quickest, most efficient way possible so that you can be as productive as possible. And sometimes, unfortunately, your needs as a person are not readily cared about in the midst of that. So in a lot of these situations, you would find yourself where no one cares about whether or not you have lunch. No one cares whether or not, if you're at a surgery center, if someone comes to relieve you, because ultimately the patient has to be taken care of, and there are less people in private practice to be able to provide those courtesies. So unfortunately, you have to suck it up, and it just has to get done regardless of if you like it or not. And unfortunately, that can leave you sometimes feeling as though no one cares. So that was a huge issue for me when I joined the practice, and something that took a little while to get over. But you know, when you're making more money and you're in a situation where you can potentially see the benefits of being part owner in a business, you suck up the positive and you throw away the negative, and you just in this business, we are taught for so long to delay gratification that it's going to get better. The it's going to get better mentality of thinking that things are just going to one day be different than what they are. And unfortunately, you can rationalize a lot of things when you make exponentially more money. But long story short, as time went on, my group decided to sell to a larger venture capitalist organization. In anesthesiology, corporatization of private practice groups is a huge concern and something that has been pretty pervasive in our field and in a lot of other fields like emergency medicine, like surgical practices, etc. And essentially what we mean by corporatization is that large companies buy profitable private practices that were previously owned by the physician members and then essentially dissolve that practice, and then all of the physicians that are there are left to work for the larger organization. Typically there are monies involved in that, which I won't get into, but essentially you're paid commensurate to your ownership in the practice to relinquish that power of owning the practice and then essentially work for someone else, typically at a reduced salary, and you go forward in that regard. Now, there are some benefits to working in a corporatized practice, namely having more back-end support as it relates to billing. And typically when you're a part of a larger corporatized organization, it's purported that you have a large negotiating possibility with insurance companies, which can increase reimbursement and ultimately make the business more profitable. And all of that may indeed be true. However, I think it's important for people who are in a situation where they may be selling their practice to understand that these large organizations are not interested in buying practices that are not profitable. The reason why someone wants to buy your business is because it is profitable and there is a profit and a margin to be made off your back as a physician. And for my experience in dealing in a corporatized group, that is exactly what I felt like after the deal was done. There were a lot of promises made and a lot of promises that were broken as it relates to the deal that was moved forward in my previous group. And as a result, there was a loss of physicians. Many people decided that it wasn't worth it for them and they began to quit. So what typically happens in these situations is that you essentially have fewer people who are able to do call and fewer people who are able to actually work. So then this affects your lifestyle as a physician exponentially, meaning that you're going to be working later, you're going to be working more without breaks, and you're going to be doing more call. And if you could imagine in a private practice, you're already doing a lot of call, you're already having a pretty unpredictable schedule, and now you're contracting the amount of people that are actually available to support the group, and so things begin to implode. So it got to a point for me where literally I felt like I was going to work and I never knew when I was going to come home. I had problems being able to get the vacation that I needed in order to attend family functions. And essentially, I started to feel like I was in residency again. And it got to a point where I felt severely underappreciated and I felt extremely taken advantage of, as if I were being as productive as possible. And essentially, I felt like I wasn't making the money that I was owed, and I felt like I wasn't able to, on the contra side of that, have the lifestyle that I deserved. So I began to resent my job. And initially, I thought that I was having burnout. And by burnout, I experienced issues with not wanting to go to work, issues with feeling my attitude change. You know, I always wanted to be a physician. I always, since I was 6 years old, knew that being a doctor was a calling on my life from the Lord. And I worked diligently and was gratified through the entire experience of becoming a physician. Yes, some things were difficult, but it was never a situation where I absolutely hated doing it. And so when it got to a point where I thought, you know, I didn't want to do this anymore, I knew that a change had to be made. So with that being said, you know, again, we are all the kings and queens of delayed gratification. And so for about a year after our group was corporatized, I tried to convince myself that it was going to get better. But I had to come to terms with the fact that the only thing I could change was myself in this situation. And the only thing that would allow for me to get the joy back from being a physician and from doing what it is that I knew I was called to do was to absolutely cut my ties and run for the hills. And so I did just that. I decided that I needed to leave my job, obviously in a professional way. So I ensured that I put in the appropriate notice, and I gave them a 90-day notice, and I left my job. And I became an independent contractor. And in a different video, I'll explain exactly what that means, exactly what that entails, and exactly how I was able to do that. And honestly, I couldn't be happier. I've regained autonomy over my life. I have regained autonomy over my schedule, and I have reclaimed my time. And so with that being said, I'd like to encourage any person who is a physician, who is in residency, who is finding themselves overwhelmed by their current circumstance because they're in a toxic work environment, or they find themselves in a job that is underappreciating them, or they feel as though they're giving a lot and getting very little, that they understand that it may not necessarily be the fact or the discipline of what you're doing. It wasn't me being an anesthesiologist that was the problem. It was my job that was the problem. And so I'd like to encourage you all to take the steps that are necessary to ensure that you're able to be as productive and to really walk into the callings that you have on your life. So with all of that being said, we're gonna cut it here, and I'm gonna take you guys to my sister's house, and we're gonna have some fun, socially distanced, and I'll catch up with you guys later. Alright guys, I just got home from my sister's place and I'm pretty tired now, so I'm going to head inside. But I wanted to thank you first for taking this journey with me today and hanging out with me and my family and listening to me rant about physician burnout. Listen, go down in the comments, leave me a comment regarding physician burnout if you have any questions in that regard. And if you like what we do here at the channel, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.